Hi everyone. So in today's video, we'll see the basic difference between creating a RAG application and fine-tuning a model. So what is the difference? And when should you use what? So what is the use case when you should think about having a RAG application and when you should think of having a fine-tuning a model, right? So basically in this LLM era, you can just differentiate the two things between having a RAG application, which is this RAG, and the other one could be like fine-tuning a model, fine-tuning. So first of all, let's understand how these two works, right? So when you want to have a RAG application, so let's say you have some of the data with you in the existing or traditional database. So because when there was no AI, so at that time also, since then we are storing data in this traditional database, right? So this is your traditional database, and also we might have some document storage like S3. So here also we might be storing some of the data or the documents or anything or videos, anything we must be storing. So this is how the current the traditional architecture has been, right? So now since AI came up, let's say we want to create some application or create a chatbot that you can ask in your local language or in any way. You can just say just give fetch me data, right? So how that is done? So maybe the output of this RAG application is at the end you want to have a chat application, right? This is a chat application. This could be a mobile app or anything, right? So what you will do is you'll ask me, for example, let's take an example. Let's say there is a lawyer application, a lawyer diary, right? So what this lawyer diary is doing, so since age is, so it is storing all its data up in a database and it is storing its document in S3. So now they want to give a feature where each lawyer, they can just chat with the assistant and they can say just for example, what was my cases in that day? Maybe give them summarize them in a short way or give them in a paragraph, right? So like you ask ChatGPT, right? So they give you a summary as per your requirement. So but we have the data currently stored in a database with some documents, and what you want is at the end you will ask it some questions and it will just fetch from everywhere, from a database, from a S3, wherever that, from the documents, wherever you have the data, you want it to fetch from everywhere and you want to return us all this data. So how we'll do it? So let's first, we're just the first page, we're just learning the RAG part now. So we'll come to the fine tuning part later. So what essentially we need to do is, there is a concept of vector database, right? So what is this vector database? So it is, you can say, n-dimensional or three-dimensional representation where we store the data in vectors. And what are the vectors? The vectors are just numbers. You can think of like in the physics stage, if you remember, we all have heard about scalars and vectors. So what from a very high level view, you can think of this, all these data we have in our database or in the S3. So we'll convert all them to vectors and we'll store them in a vector database, right? So this is how in the three-dimensional space the data will be stored, and how this conversion happens. This again itself is a very detailed topic, and we'll come to this later at some point. But as of now, you can think that we'll convert all our database and the S3 parts to we'll convert all of the data, existing data we have in the vector database. And so from a very high level, if you'll see, once you are writing let's say user is writing some questions, so what will happen is we'll just as per the questions, we'll query this vector database, okay, and we'll retrieve some of the information based on those data, and we'll take those informations like those informations we retrieved plus user query, like whatever user searched or asked to use, okay. So we'll give everything, all of this to a LLM. So now the LLM gets all these ideas like all the vectors plus the user query that you are getting. So what it will do is it will just pre-process everything and it will draft a response for you, and then it can return you that you can just give as a reply to this user. So this way, let's say a lawyer asked like what was all of my cases on January 2025. So what will happen is, so as they're asking now, the January is over, by this time we are expecting that all this data from this database and this S3, they will be converted to vectors and will be stored in this vector database. And when you ask about that, so what will happen is all these vectors, so they will be fetched, and along with the user query they will be passed on LLM, and then LLM can just write the answer for that, and what that can do is that will just give you as a reply to this one. But now the question is, you might be thinking, so okay, so we converted all our data to vectors at some point, but what about the new data, right? So let's say I'm asking about yesterday data or today's data, how that happens, how the vector database will be updated with this all this recent database or the data, right? So what we can do is we can have a pipeline set of where whenever there is data incoming in this one, or maybe at a day, at some particular time, what we can do is we can just convert all of this data to a vector database, and we can regularly update all our data to vectors, right? So this way, this is called a RAG application, retrieval augmentation and generation. So what we're essentially doing is, when we're usually searching for something, we're retrieving all this data from the vector database. This is the retrieval part, and then we are just doing the augmentation generation using the LLM. So we're getting the core data, and along with user question, we are passing this to an LLM, and LLM is generating us the response. So this is nothing but our RAG application. So now coming to our first question, what are the basic difference between RAG and fine tuning? So when this RAG, now is important is when you have a stream of data and the data is coming, always is flowing. For example, a real world application. So in those cases, it makes more sense to have a RAG application. So now we'll go to the fine tuning part. So people, I have seen people getting confused with the RAG and the fine tuning. But what is the fine tuning? So fine tuning is, let's say you took a base LLM. So you are not creating something from scratch. You are taking a base LLM. This base LLM you could take, for example, any open source LLM that is available. For example, it could be Llama, or it could be your DeepSeek, right? So there are a lot of open source LLMs available these days. So you take any of this, and you make it learn few more things, right, that it doesn't know. For example, you want to train it based on some local language that is that Llama, let's say, it's not good at. Maybe I'll take an example, which is Odia, for example. That's a language. So while this base language was being trained, so it was not good at that language. So you are now giving it more data, more context with that language. So, and also one thing notice in this one, the base language, for example, I'm learning a language Odia, right? So it is not changing every day or every minute. So the core thing to know a language, that still remains constant. So that doesn't make any sense to store in a vector database, right? That is not a real-time data. That is a knowledge to have. And when you have this use case, you have some knowledge, and that needs to be inherited to models, right? So in those cases, it makes more sense to fine tune your model, right? But if you have some real data, you want those data to be available in a application, and there is a data flow, right? Usually are creating data, and your LLM needs to get updated with those data. In those cases, it makes more sense to have a RAG application. But when you want to teach something that's not changing every day, right? So that is there, but you just, as the LLM or the base LLM or the core LLM that you are taking, that is not good at it. That could be also your personal data. I took example of a Odia language, but that could be anything, right? So when you are taking such examples, so in those cases, it makes more sense to fine tune your model, right? I hope I'm making sense. If there is any doubt still this one, you can add a comment, and I will explain it further for you. Thank you for staying connected. Have a good day.